Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have round 11 of the Tata Steel 2021 chess tournament. The rest day, the final rest day, I should say, is done, and now we're down to our final 3 rounds. Going into today, Anish Giri is in first place by half a point ahead of everybody else, but he's got a game with the black pieces against none other than his bromance partner, Magnus Carlsen. We're going to kick that. Yesterday, Anish in his interview said, "I'm terrified," but he also said, "I'm terrified of playing everybody." And then we have a couple of other very interesting games I will show you. Timestamps on the video player. Let's go. Magnus Carlsen plays the move e4. Anish Giri plays e5. Not looking to expose the Najdorf, which, he has a course on, but the Najdorf has been getting crushed in this tournament. So Anish goes for e5. They develop classically with the horsies. Both bishops come out in c3. Black plays knight f6. And now, d4 is the way you play this aggressively with white. Oftentimes you lose the e4 pawn, center explodes, but these guys know what they're doing when all of the craziness happens. So Magnus plays the move d3. Anish Giri castles, and Magnus goes down like 4 or 5 layers in the database here and plays the move b4. This is not a very common move. It's not a bad move by any stretch of the imagination, but the thing is that, early on when you extend your pawns like this, they can just be targets. You're bringing your pawns closer to your opponent's territory. And after knight d2, you see Anish, who's fully prepared with development, plays the move d5. He plays as aggressively as possible, and Magnus actually backs up to b3, and Anish finishes his development without even... What was that? My god. Without even taking this pawn, Anish finishes his development. Magnus plays queen to c2. Now we have a trade, and bishop d6. Officially, no games left in the database. Is a brand new position. So let's see what happens. h3 attacks the bishop. Anish says there's no need for me to trade this for no reason. Rook b1. Super cryptic stuff going on here, I gotta say. Like, why are you not castling, Magnus? I don't know. My kids are watching. I don't have kids, but students. This is not good. a5. Nice move from Anish, making Magnus decide what he's going to do with the b pawn. If you take, I'm gonna take with the knight. I'm gonna trade my knight for your bishop. Plus, if we trade, I have an open rook. So I'm going to play a3. See, the thing is, if Magnus plays b5 in this position to try to attack the knight, when the knight moves, again, you've just extended so far. You can play a4. This is probably the best way to play this position. So now my rook is still blocked in. But chess is a game of decisions, right? So that's why Magnus plays a3. But this allows Anish a little bit of time. And now Anish himself plays the move b5. Clamping down on the c4 square, and the big question is going to be if Magnus Carlsen can successfully play the move c3 to c4. For now, he castles. Anish drops his knight back. This is called a reroute. His knight can't do anything on c6, so it's trying to get to another more useful square. Queen to c8, flexible move. Gets first of all, the queen off the d file. If there's ever going to be any sort of pressure, it eyes this entire diagonal. g4, for instance, for white. Now the queen has some vision there. Difficult also to move this knight. So for example, if Magnus plays the move knight f1, there is bishop f3, gf3, and queen h3. So that's another way to stop Magnus' development. That's why Magnus plays the move queen d3, rook b8, defending the pawn on b5 from the queen. We get knight to h4. This is very instructive way to play the position. It's trying to play knight to f5, maybe. We'll see. Knight to g6. And what's interesting is that it doesn't play knight to f5. If you play knight to f5, black also gets knight to f4. It's a give and take. So instead he trades, and he has a new knight. The new knight is gonna try to do the dirty work. Rook d8 hits the queen, and Anish Giri, another fine example of pawn play on the other side of the board. Magnus brings out the bishop to hit the knight. Anish brings it back. Knight g3, and this allowance, what is that a word? What Magnus allows here? It's not good. Very squalid situation here for the bishop on c2. I just learned that word, so I'm trying to use it in a video to act smart. It means extremely unpleasant. So the bishop on c2 just really isn't doing much. And Anish actually said in his interview he was very perplexed that Magnus let him do this. If you take on c5 and you make me take with the queen, then this is not under any pressure, but at least your bishop stays alive, right? What happens in the game is that the bishop is completely shut out, and Anish is able to just kick out Magnus's bishops, activate his queen, even make this trade, because again, what do bishops like? Open space, and this bishop is stuck in an apartment with no windows, as I said in my last video. Look at this. This bishop just never moves again. When's it ever going to move again? When's it going to move again? Hello? Can someone call the bishop on c2? No, Magnus Carlsen got his bishop on c2 shut out of the game, and it literally never moved again. And then the players just repeated. That's you know, they're super GMs. What are you gonna do? They get to a it's impossible for anybody to make any progress here. Fiona asked after if Anish made this draw from a position of strength. You can argue that here, Anish has more potential with his pieces, but the problem is that if Anish is ever going to play, just hypothetically speaking, like let's bring the knight back, let's deactivate this queen further, let's go here, I'm trying not to change the position too much, but for example, let's say Anish tries to make progress with his pawns, right? To play the move f5, getting some trades going. This is only benefiting white. Like, you're not supposed to open the position for the guy that has the bishops, even though the position is completely fine for black. Like, that's why they repeat it, because you shut the bishop out of the game, but you're never going to get to this. No one can ever get to this pawn. You're not going to have enough time to somehow sneak around and, maybe Magnus won't see it. But Magnus gets his bishop shut out, and Anish Giri effortlessly draws the game. So, kudos to him. High-level game of chess, but relatively tame game. But now, we have to. That's our appetizer, as you saw. Picture of the thumbnail. Now it's time to get serious, ladies and gentlemen. We have TARI, the number 2 player in the world. Not yet. In Norway. See, if I hadn't caught myself, I would have seen some comments. You said in the world, Gotham. No, that's Fabiano Caruana. Number 1 handsomest player in the world, though. Versus Andrei ESIPENKO, recently a super GM. That's an unofficial title in chess once you cross 2700. ESIPENKO has done it. Huge congrats to him. We have a Rui Lopez, d6, knight f6, and bishop d7. Very weird. There's no bishop on c5. There's no pawn on b5. Not the usual stuff. It's very strange and unique. So notice that as a beginner, you might be thinking, get my knight into the middle. But these guys, they play pawn up, because if you have a chance to get 2 pawns in the center, it's good, even if you use a building block. And ESIPENKO plays g6, so he turns the position into kind of a King's Indian. You don't know what the King's Indian defense is. After this, you got to go look up King's Indian defense. Learn it. It's great. Fantastic opening for black. So when black has the bishop on g7, this kind of setup. And, TARI plays bishop c2. So officially, like, no more moves in the database. And knight h5. Super common idea. We see these knight jumps onto the h file to get back into the f file. But TARI goes takes, and has his own reroute planned with his knight. Now the bishop sees the knight coming into f4. So we get knight f4, knight e3. He doesn't want to take just yet. King to h8. Very clear what ESIPENKO wants to do. Maybe he has an idea to storm some pawns. So we get knight to d5. Nice activation of the knight. Knight comes back to e6. And h4, same side attacking idea with the pawn. ESIPENKO says, anything you can do, I can do better. It's officially a Grandmaster game, ladies and gentlemen. Both players have recreationally moved the pawns in front of their king, which, you're not supposed to do, but they're GM, so they make the rules. And now bishop e3. So the interesting thing about this position is that white is a lot better. If you plug this position into a computer, it says plus 1.5, which means 1.5 pawns. Why? Why is white so much better? Well, this is how you evaluate a position. Little mini lessons with Gotham. Number 1, obviously material. In this case, it's the same. Number 2, king safety. You could argue that black's king is a little bit weaker. A little bit. I mean, more, the pawns are tender. You can identify more weaknesses. As hard as it is to get to them, a little bit of weakness. But number 3 and number 4. Number 3, activity of your pieces. The future prospects of your pieces. In this case, you can't try to tell me these bishops leave an impression on anybody, considering neither of them has any forward movement, right? So also, white has moves like b4. So white is equipped to play on both sides of the board. h4, b4, down the middle. White is controlling and dominating on 3 sides. White has more space, which is the 4th category. Space, pawn structure, how many squares you control or fight for in your opponent's side of the board. So now we get knight to e7. The person with less space wants to trade. In some cases, you can't avoid trades, but you can transform your position in an advantageous way. In this case, this would open this and this. Again, that weakness. See, that weakness comes back to bite. So black can't take, black has to maneuver. Meanwhile, TARI just keeps advancing. He's like, bro, I can take as much space as I want. You basically saying, walk into my backyard, put your foot down, this is how much land you own now, right? So we get a5, a3. He's trying to hold it all together. Knight a7, little action there on the queen side, and we get this position. Take. But, white is still better here. White has more space on the queen side, the full a file. And when you are in a worse position, you have 2 choices. Number 1, just defend, suffer, do your best impression of a Buddhist and try to reach nirvana. Number 2, you're losing 4 rounds in a 5-round MMA fight. What do? Bite down on the mouthpiece, you go punch. And that's what ESIPENKO did. He said, I don't like this position very much. I'm going to go f5. The problem is, when you're worse, you're not equipped to do that. So take, and immediately I'm punishing you for moving the knight Sorry, for moving the pawn to f5. This square I've been granted access to, and now you would think that he plays bishop takes, but no, pawn takes. Why did he do that? Well, if he moved the bishop, this knight would get into d4. That's like the biggest problem. The knight would get into d4. Also, this opens the h-file. So in the future, maybe you get up, up, and rook h1. And who's going to guard this pawn, actually? The other thing is this pawn just takes away squares. So we get f4 from ESIPENKO. Rook a8! Rook a8! Look at that! Danger levels! And if you take my rook, I have check, king g8, and double check and mate. Oh my goodness. What a dynamite move. That is why I have a video on danger levels. Clearly, Ari and Tari reviewed that video before he saw this game. Not, you know, that's what I think. The rook a8, beautiful move, forces queen g6, and now, very simple, take, and very calm bishop d2. And we see why ESIPENKO was not equipped to move any more of his pieces on that side. Too many weaknesses. Everything's hanging. Everything's hanging. He moves the knight to a3. The bishop slides back, attacks the queen. Queen takes g5, defending everything just for a moment, but remember this open weakness. Queen joins with the bishop. Bam, bam, bam. And black resigned. Black actually has no way to stop mate. You can't move your king. And if you slide the queen back to g7, it looks like you've done your job. Except you die a very slow death here. I play bishop c3. I'm going to take on e5 and pin your queen to your king. And you can't do a damn thing about it. I play the move bishop c3. You know, I play it. I screw it in. I press the clock. I write it down and I look at you like, I'm hungry, man. I'm hungry. Restaurant outside closes in 40 minutes. Resign the damn game. End this game right now. And that's what happened. Ari and Tari gets revenge for his countrymen. Andrei ESIPENKO beat the Norwegian and world number 1, but lost a few rounds later to Ari and Tari, which is one of the struggles of when you first, cross the 2700 ELO barrier. You got to start beating on the guys that are, 40, 50 points lower than you, and they're really strong. Like, that's what Firouza's done really well. He beats a lot of 2700s. He still struggles a little bit against Magnus, against, maybe Fabi. He drew Fabi today, but that is the path. And I'm not saying this from experience. I'm not a member of the 2700, 2600, 2500, and even now 2400 club. But what I'm trying to convey here is that is what it takes. To get up there, you pick points from them with draws. Every now and then you get a win. But everybody who's beneath you on the rating ladder, you stomp on them. Not actually. That would result in some sort of lawsuit, I imagine. But that's what you do. And for this last game, speaking of people who are on the up and up, we have Jordan van Forest, who's got one of the highest performance ratings in this event, over 2800, playing Pentala Harikrishna from India. So e4, e5. Okay, we've seen this in every game today. How interesting. But this we have not seen. But this structure we have seen. D6, castles h6. Now, I actually recommend, for those of you playing this with the black pieces, who still for some reason play the Italian for both sides, you don't play the Danish Gambit, you don't play the Vienna, you don't play the Evans Gambit, you don't play the Scotch, you like these positions. By the way, if you like positions like this that look completely the same, what are you doing? Do you pour your milk in your bowl before your cereal? Do you drink your cereal? You eat your cereal with water or something? Y'all people are weird, man. But look, this is how I recommend you play this position with black. Well, until he did that. G5. There's a lot of really interesting games where black doesn't castle, and black waits for white to castle, and then gets all of their pieces out and castles queenside. It will lead to a lot more exciting stuff. I'm actually disappointed. I thought Hari waited a little bit to castle kingside. I was going to hold it suspensefully, but he castled kingside on the next move. That's just one way to play the position. But Hari also plays this position in an interesting way. He plays knight g4, and then look what he does. He plays king h8 and f5. Very aggressive. Very aggressive. This is how you should play. You should make people uncomfortable, whether that's by kicking them when you play them physically under the table or on the chessboard. And it looks like he's sacrificing a piece, but he's not really sacrificing a piece, because taking this knight is too dangerous. Just to show you what can happen, queen h4, now the bishop, the rook, the queen, the pawn, the bishop, the other rook, when the other rook comes in, very bad. So Jordan van Forest strikes back in the center. And Jordan van Forest has shown a tremendous preparation in this event, leads to a forced sequence of moves where a ton of things fly off the board and knight f1 happens. And what is going on? So Jordan is down a pawn, but, excuse me, not down a pawn. He's up a pawn of material. He has a knight, whereas Pentala has the extra 2 pawns, right? So again, if you're confused about what happened there, Jordan exploded the position. He played the move d4, e takes d4 happened, right? We got h takes g4, d3 from Hare Krishna. What Hare Krishna should have done here is played pawn takes g4, knight takes d4, and then g3. Kind of enabling this diagonal. He had to sacrifice. Still there was the move knight f1. There's a lot of theory. There's a lot of different complicated ideas. But in general, the position that you get after all of this explosion happens is that white has the knight, black has the 2 pawns. White has a pawn up, not pawn down, not point down. But black has a lot of pressure. Black has the bishop, black has the queen, black has the rook. The thing is that, you know, Pensala gives the knight. So now if Jordan defends the position in the right way, he's going to be fine. And he immediately goes for a bishop trade. Then he plays bishop c4, activating his bishop. He plays bishop d5, centralizing his bishop. Plays knight to g3, developing his knight. Trades once. Plays queen d1. Why did he play queen d1? Well, b2's a bit of a target. He doesn't want his queen involved with it. This is going to potentially be a weakness in the future. To a5. Let's also not forget that the pawn on a6 was hanging. So we get rook a2, rook b8, rook d2, and queen h4, trying to hunt him down. Jordan finds the best move here according to computer, which is b3, moving the pawn out of the sights of the bishop, and technically the sights of the rook, because now the pawn is protected by this bishop, and now it's surgical. Pensala backs up, because otherwise bishop c4 was coming, and I was going to win the pawn anyway. So now I just have 1 pawn, and the rest of the game, I mean, it was a very long game, but watch. So first he gets his knight out of the way, no mate. This knight is the lifeline to the h2 square, completely covering it. Now we kick the queen out. Now we take this pawn on c5. A nice little flashy tactic. Gets the rook in. Cannot be taken, because if you take me, it's a fork of your rook and your king. So you've got to go here. Jordan calculates this all down and transforms the position. He gets an endgame from a piece-up situation to a spot where he's only up a pawn. Look at that. That's how you know it's a sign of a mature and very strong player. And queen d7. He uses his dominant piece activity to make Pensala back up. And look at this. Everything in his position is tied together. The bishop can't move. The queen can't move because it's guarding everybody. And now Jordan just plays knight to e3. Who guards this pawn? He calculated all of this out in advance. And slowly but surely wins the second pawn. Advances. Even noticing that his king is wide open. Where are the threats? There's no threats. He brings the queen back to guard. He activates the rook. Beautiful. Look at that. Look at that. That's almost mate. Can't take because of this. And then queen h5, cold-blooded. Calculates it all out. Come and get my king, bro. Come and get my king. Yeah, I'm gonna run. I'll be fine. Queen e6, and easy. Gets the queen trade, and watch as even with the passive king on the first rank, look at that. Nice technique. Everybody gets a turn. You see that? Everybody gets a turn. The knight, the pawns, each one by one. Don't just run 1 pawn down the board. And after rook f7, look at that. Even at the end, the king got involved, right? So after knight h6, Pensala resigns. Because after he'll play king h8, I'm just going to play f5. Great game from Jordan. I mean, what can you say? Absorbed the opening pressure. And when I said that, you know, I think that people should play openings like this, that Pensala's playing, I know you're going to be like, well, Gotham, he lost the game, so clearly we shouldn't play like that. No, but that's not what I'm saying. First of all, you guys aren't going to be playing 2700 level, you know, Grandmasters in Jordan Van Forest. But things like this with g5 really throw people off. Because people don't like to be attacked. So if I can give you a few bits of advice from this video, it's how to evaluate positions using those 4 points of material, king safety, piece activity, pawn structure, and who has more space. And at the same time, you know, putting people under pressure and not just lazily moving in the opening, just trying to attack them before they get comfortable. That concludes the most exciting games of round 11 in Tata Steel 2021. And last but not least, we will end with our usual. These are the standings. Anish Giri still sits atop the leaderboard with 7.5 points out of 11, but now he has 3 suitors, and they are Fabiano Caruana, Jordan Van Forest, and Alireza Firouzja. Then ESIPENKO with a half point, but then we drop a full point off a cliff. There are 2 rounds remaining, ladies and gentlemen, and tomorrow I will go full screen for intensity purposes. Tomorrow, Anish Giri has the white pieces versus Alireza Firouzja. 7.5 out of 11 versus 7 out of 11. Youth versus experience. Handsomeness versus height. I think Alireza is really tall. I would be a bad height man for this match, but I look forward to the recap video tomorrow.